The scorching Texas sun beat down on the asphalt parking lot like a physical presence, waves of heat shimmering up from the cracked pavement as I hurried across it, my arms loaded with grocery bags that cut into my fingers despite the flimsy plastic handles. Inside each bag, I'd carefully selected the cheapest versions of everything. Generic cereal instead of the brand my twins begged for, store-brand mac and cheese, discount bread that would go stale in 2 days. Every penny counted when you were raising 2 6-year-olds alone on a receptionist's salary. The building that housed Winston Enterprises loomed ahead, all glass and steel and Texas limestone, a monument to wealth and power that felt obscene in its opulence. I'd been working here for exactly 3 weeks, taking the job without asking too many questions because the pay was better than anything else I could find in this godforsaken town, and because I was desperate. Desperate enough to ignore the whispers about what Winston Enterprises really was, about the family that owned it, about the kinds of business that happened behind those tinted windows. I should have known better. Should have recognized the name Winston and run the other way. But 6 years changes a person, makes you forget the warnings that once seemed so urgent. And I'd needed the health insurance, needed the steady paycheck, needed something, anything, to give my children a chance at a normal life. My phone buzzed in my pocket as I juggled the bags, trying to free one hand. A text from Maria, my neighbor who watched the twins after school. Jake skinned his knee at the playground. Nothing serious, cleaned it up. Ellie made you a drawing. They're asking when you'll be home. The familiar ache settled in my chest. That constant guilt of a working mother who never felt like she was doing enough. I'd be home in 3 hours, after I finished filing the mountain of paperwork that Mr. Reynolds, the office manager, had dumped on my desk this morning. 3 hours felt like an eternity when your babies were asking for you. I pushed through the side entrance, grateful for the blast of air conditioning that hit my face, and headed for the break room to stash my groceries in the small fridge. The afternoon sun slanting through the windows turned everything golden, beautiful in that particular Texas way that made your heart hurt with the memory of summers that felt like freedom instead of survival. The break room was blessedly empty, and I quickly shoved my bags onto the bottom shelf, trying not to think about how pathetic they looked, next to the gourmet lunches some of my coworkers brought. I'd just closed the fridge when I heard voices in the hallway, low and urgent, the kind of conversation that makes you freeze instinctively. He's coming today, flying in from Dallas. Reynolds said to have everything ready. The voice belonged to Marcus, one of the security guys who'd been surprisingly kind to me, holding doors and offering to carry heavy boxes. After 6 years, he finally shows his face here again. Another voice, female, brittle with nerves. Do you think it's true what they're saying? That he's taking over completely? When Jared Winston wants something, he takes it. Man's got ice in his veins after what happened to his brother. The name hit me like a fist to the solar plexus. Jared Winston. No, it couldn't be. There had to be dozens of Jared Winstons in Texas, hundreds maybe. It didn't have to be him, didn't have to be the man whose face I still saw every time I looked at my children, whose voice I still heard in my dreams, whose betrayal had carved out a piece of my soul I'd never gotten back. I pressed my hand against my stomach, trying to breathe through the sudden nausea. 6 years. I'd spent 6 years building a life away from this town, away from the Winston name, away from the memories that still woke me up at night. And I'd come back anyway, driven by desperation and the naive hope that enough time had passed, that I could blend into the background of this city that had once felt like a prison. Josie, you okay? Marcus had appeared in the doorway, his broad face creased with concern. Fine, I managed, my voice sounding distant and strange. Just the heat. I should get back to my desk. I didn't wait for his response, just pushed past him and headed for the reception area, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. It didn't mean anything. Even if it was him, even if Jared Winston was coming here today, there was no reason he'd have anything to do with me. I was just a receptionist, invisible behind my desk with my generic clothing and carefully neutral expression. He wouldn't even notice me. The afternoon crawled by with excruciating slowness. Every time the elevator dinged, I jumped. Every time someone walked past my desk, I looked up, expecting to see those dark eyes that had haunted me for 6 years. But it was always someone else, and slowly I began to convince myself that I was being paranoid. That even if Jared Winston was coming to the building, I'd be long gone before he arrived. At 4:47, Mr. Reynolds emerged from his office, his usually ruddy face pale and sheened with sweat, despite the aggressive air conditioning. "Ms. Rogers," he said, and there was something in his voice that made my spine straighten. "I need you to prepare the conference room on the executive floor. Mr. Winston will be arriving shortly for a meeting." "The executive floor?" I repeated stupidly. I'd never been up there, had been told explicitly during my orientation that the top 3 floors were off limits to general staff. "Use the private elevator." He thrust a key card at me with shaking hands. "Water, coffee, the good whiskey from the cabinet. Everything has to be perfect. Do you understand?" I understood that Reynolds was terrified, which meant I should be too. But I took the key card anyway, because what choice did I have? Refusing would mean questions I couldn't answer, attention I couldn't afford. The private elevator was tucked away behind an unmarked door, all polished brass and dark wood that smelled of lemon oil and money. I stepped inside, and the doors slid shut with a whisper, sealing me in. My reflection stared back at me from the mirrored walls. 28 years old, and I looked older. Tiredness etched around my eyes. My dark blonde hair pulled back in a practical bun. My simple gray dress chosen specifically to be forgettable. I barely recognized the girl I'd been 6 years ago. The one who'd believed in love and second chances and happy endings. The elevator opened directly into a reception area that made the lobby downstairs look shabby. Everything here spoke of power and wealth accumulated over generations. The conference room Mr. Reynolds had mentioned was through double doors of frosted glass, and I let myself in with the key card, my hands steadier than I expected. The room was massive, dominated by a table that could seat 20, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the entire city. I could see the highway from here, the endless Texas sprawl, and far in the distance, the neighborhood where Maria was probably helping my twins with their homework, blissfully unaware that their mother's carefully constructed world was about to implode. I focused on the task at hand, arranging water glasses, starting the coffee maker, finding the whiskey Reynolds had mentioned in a hidden cabinet. My hands moved mechanically while my mind raced. Maybe he wouldn't even look at me. Maybe I could just finish setting up and leave before he arrived. Maybe I could avoid this confrontation entirely. I'd just placed the whiskey bottle on the sideboard when I heard voices in the reception area. Male voices, low and authoritative. My whole body went rigid, every survival instinct screaming at me to hide, to run, to do anything but stand here waiting. The conference room doors opened. 3 men walked in, all wearing expensive suits that screamed money and danger. I didn't look at their faces, keeping my eyes down the way I'd learned to do, trying to be invisible. But then one of them spoke, and the voice froze the blood in my veins. "That'll be all for now, gentlemen. I'll call you when I'm ready." That voice, deep and rough with a slight drawl that 6 years and 1,000 miles hadn't erased from my memory. The voice that had whispered promises in the dark, that had said my name like a prayer, that had torn my heart out when it told me to leave and never come back. The other men filed out, and then we were alone. I could feel him looking at me, feel the weight of his gaze like a physical presence. Every instinct told me to keep my eyes down, to finish my task and leave. But I'd never been good at doing what I should. I looked up. Jared Winston stood 10 feet away, and he was everything I remembered, and nothing like the man I'd left behind. He'd always been handsome in that dangerous way that should have warned me off. All sharp cheekbones and intense eyes and a mouth that knew how to devastate. But there'd been softness there too, especially when he looked at me. A vulnerability he'd shown only in our most private moments. That softness was gone. The man staring at me with those same dark eyes was harder, colder, carved from ice and fury. His black hair was shorter now, styled back from a face that had become almost cruel in its beauty. The suit he wore probably cost more than I made in 6 months, and he wore it with the casual confidence of someone who'd been born to power and had claimed even more through force of will. We stared at each other across that expensive conference room, and I watched the exact moment recognition hit him. His eyes widened fractionally, the only sign of surprise on that controlled face. Then they narrowed, going dark with something I couldn't name. Anger? Hatred? Something worse? Josie Rogers. My name on his lips after 6 years of silence. Well, this is unexpected. I should have said something. Should have explained, defended myself, demanded answers. But my throat had closed up, all the words I'd rehearsed 1,000 times dying before they could form. He moved then, crossing the space between us with slow, deliberate steps that reminded me of a predator stalking prey. He stopped close, too close, near enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and dark that made my traitorous body remember things it had no business remembering. "Tell me," he said softly, and his voice was like velvet over steel. "Does your husband know you're working for the Winston family? Or is he the trusting type?" The question was so unexpected it jolted me out of my paralysis. "I don't have a husband." Something flickered in his eyes. "Boyfriend then, partner, whatever they call it these days." "No one," I said, and hated how my voice shook. "There's no one." "Interesting." He reached out, and I flinched before I could stop myself. His hand froze mid-air, and for just a second, I saw something that might have been hurt flash across his face before it was locked down behind that icy control. "Still afraid of me, I see." "I'm not afraid of you." The lie came automatically. "No?" He completed the motion, his fingers catching a strand of hair that had escaped my bun. "Then why are you trembling?" "Because you're too close. Because 6 years haven't been nearly long enough to forget how your hands felt on my skin. Because seeing you again makes me feel like that naive girl who thought love could conquer blood and violence and family legacy." "Mr. Winston," I said instead, forcing steel into my voice. "Is there anything else you need for your meeting?" His smile was cold enough to burn. "Mr. Winston, so formal, Josie. There was a time when you called me something very different." The memory of those words, breathy and desperate in the darkness, made heat flood my face. That was a long time ago. 6 years. He stepped back, releasing my hair, and I could breathe again. 6 years since you disappeared in the middle of the night. Since you ran away from everything we had. The injustice of it broke through my fear. I ran. You told me to leave. You chose your family, your legacy, your brother over everything we... Don't. The word cracked through the air like a whip. Don't you dare talk about my brother. I'd heard about Marcus Winston's death, of course. The whole state had heard about it. A massacre at a warehouse on the border. A power play gone wrong. Bodies burned beyond recognition. And Jared's brother, the golden heir to the Winston Empire, had been among the dead. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I heard what happened. I'm sorry for your loss. Are you?" He moved to the whiskey I'd set out, poured himself a generous measure with steady hands. Strange how convenient the timing was. My brother dies. I take over the family business, and you just happened to show up working in one of our buildings. My blood ran cold. "You think I planned this? That I somehow knew you'd be here?" I think 6 years is a long time to stay hidden, Josie. And I think it's one hell of a coincidence that you surface now, just when things are changing. I needed a job, I said, my voice rising despite my attempts to stay calm. I didn't know this was your building. I didn't know you were coming back to Texas. If I'd known, I never wouldn't have what? He drained the whiskey in one swallow. Taken the job? Come back to town? You're here now. The question is why? I couldn't tell him. Couldn't explain about the twins, about Jake and Ellie who had his eyes and his stubborn chin. Couldn't risk him discovering that the children I'd been protecting for 6 years were his own flesh and blood. Because men like Jared Winston didn't let go of what they considered theirs, and I'd die before I let my babies become pawns in the vicious world of mob politics and family vendettas. I needed to come home, I said instead. I have family here. Family. He poured another drink. How nice for you. Tell me, Josie, does your family know what you did? Who you were involved with 6 years ago? There's nothing to know, I lied. It was a summer fling. Nothing more. I watched his knuckles go white around the glass. A summer fling, he repeated, and his voice had gone dangerously soft. Is that what you tell yourself? That it meant nothing? It was 6 years ago, Jared. I forced myself to meet his eyes, to lie directly to his face. We were different people. It's over. He stared at me for a long moment, and I couldn't read the expression in those dark eyes. Then he smiled, and it was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. You're right, he said. It is over. And since you're working for Winston Enterprises now, I suggest you remember who signs your paychecks. He set down the glass with precise care. Tell Reynolds to send up the contracts, and Josie? He waited until I was almost at the door. Welcome home. The dismissal was clear, and I fled, my legs shaking so badly I nearly stumbled. It wasn't until I was back in the elevator, the doors sliding shut on his face, that I let myself acknowledge the full horror of my situation. Jared Winston was here. Jared Winston owned the company I worked for. And based on the ice in his eyes and the fury in his voice, he hadn't forgotten anything about our past. Worse, he suspected something. I could see it in the way he'd looked at me, calculating and cold. I had to leave, had to quit, pack up the twins and run again. It was the only way to keep them safe from the man who would stop at nothing to claim what he believed was his. But as the elevator descended, and my reflection stared back at me from the mirrored walls, I knew with sinking certainty that it was already too late. Whatever I did now, wherever I ran, Jared Winston would find me, because that's what predators did. They hunted, and I'd just become his prey. I didn't sleep that night. How could I, knowing Jared Winston was back in my life, knowing he suspected something, knowing that every day I stayed in this town put my children at risk? I lay in my small bed in the cramped apartment I could barely afford, staring at the ceiling and listening to the twins breathe in the room next door, their soft snores a reminder of everything I had to lose. Jake had asked about my day at dinner, his dark eyes, so much like his father's, watching me with that unsettling perception 6-year-olds sometimes had. You seem sad, Mama, he'd said, and I'd forced a smile and told him I was just tired. Ellie had climbed into my lap and wrapped her small arms around my neck, pressing her face against my shoulder in that way that made my heart crack open every single time. Don't be sad, she'd whispered. We love you. I'd held them both until they squirmed away, giggling and asking for dessert, and I'd given them the cheap ice cream I'd bought, watching them eat it like it was the finest treat in the world. They deserved so much better than this. Better than a mother on the run, better than a tiny apartment with paper-thin walls, better than a father who didn't even know they existed. No. That wasn't fair. Jared didn't know because I'd never told him. Because I'd believed his family's lies. believed he'd chosen power over us, believed leaving was the only way to keep my babies safe from the violence that followed the Winston name like a shadow. Morning came too early, pale Texas light creeping through the thin curtains. I got the twins ready for school, packing their lunches with the same careful economy as always, kissing their foreheads as they climbed onto the school bus. Jake waved from the window, his serious little face breaking into a smile. Ellie blew me exaggerated kisses until the bus turned the corner. I should have called in sick, should have started packing, should have done anything except get in my beat-up Honda and drive to Winston Enterprises like nothing had changed. But I needed this job, needed it desperately. And some stubborn part of me, the part that had fallen in love with Jared Winston against all logic and reason, refused to run again without at least trying to understand what had really happened 6 years ago. The office was buzzing when I arrived, an electric tension in the air that set my nerves on edge. Mr. Reynolds rushed past my desk without acknowledging me, his phone pressed to his ear, and his face red with stress. Security had doubled, I noticed. Men in dark suits with earpieces positioned at every entrance, their eyes constantly scanning the room. Quite the show, isn't it? Marcus appeared beside my desk, holding 2 cups of coffee. He offered me one with a sympathetic smile. Winston's really tightening things up. Half the staff is terrified they'll be let go. Do you think he will? I accepted the coffee gratefully, my hands wrapped around the warmth. Fire people? Marcus shrugged, his expression carefully neutral. Man's got a reputation. After what happened to his brother, they say he went cold. Built the family business into something twice the size it was. Crushed anyone who got in his way. He's not here to make friends, Josie. He's here to consolidate power. The words sent a chill through me. This wasn't the Jared I'd known. The one who'd taken me on midnight drives through the countryside. Who'd laughed at my terrible jokes. Who'd held me like I was something precious. That Jared was gone, replaced by something harder and infinitely more dangerous. You okay? Marcus was watching me with concern. You've been jumpy all morning. Fine, I lied. Just nervous about the changes. He opened his mouth to respond, but his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted to something I couldn't quite read. I've got to go. But Josie? He hesitated. Be careful. Whatever's going on around here, it's bigger than just business restructuring. Watch your back. Before I could ask what he meant, he was gone, leaving me with my coffee and a growing sense of dread. The day crawled by with excruciating slowness. I filed papers, answered phones, smiled at people who barely noticed me. But I could feel eyes on me, a constant prickling awareness that made my skin crawl. Twice I turned to find one of the security men watching me, his face blank, but his attention focused. Was I being paranoid? Or was Jared already having me watched? At lunch, I retreated to my car, needing space to breathe and think. My phone rang just as I was unwrapping my sad sandwich. Unknown number. I should have ignored it, but some instinct made me answer. Josie Rogers? The voice was female, cultured, with a slight accent I couldn't place. You don't know me, but I know you. And I know what you're hiding. My blood turned to ice. Who is this? A friend or an enemy? That depends entirely on what you do next. There was amusement in her voice, cold and calculating. Did you really think you could come back to Texas and no one would notice? That you could work for Jared Winston and he wouldn't dig into your past? I don't know what you're talking about, I said, but my voice shook. Don't you? Tell me, Josie, do your twins know who their father is? Or have you been lying to them the same way you lied to Jared? The phone nearly slipped from my nerveless fingers. How do you... I know everything. Jake and Ellie Rogers, 6 years old. Brown eyes, dark hair. Their birth certificates list no father, but anyone with eyes can see the Winston genes. She paused. The question is, Does Jared know? Or are you planning to keep playing house while you work for the man whose children you stole? I didn't steal anything, I hissed, terror making me reckless. He didn't want us. He chose his family over... Did he? The question was sharp. Are you sure about that? Because the Jared Winston I know doesn't let go of what's his. And you, Josie Rogers, you and those children, you're definitely his. What do you want? My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. For now, nothing. I'm just letting you know that I'm watching, that I know your secrets. What I do with that information depends on how useful you prove to be. Her voice softened into something almost sympathetic. You're caught between two families, Josie, the Winstons and the Rogers. Your family has been circling, waiting for an opportunity to strike at Jared now that he's vulnerable. And you, with your connection to both sides, you're the perfect weapon. I'm not a weapon, I whispered. I'm just trying to survive. Aren't we all? She laughed, the sound devoid of humor. A word of advice. Don't trust anyone. Not the Winstons, not the Rogers, and especially not Jared. He's using you, even if you can't see it yet. The question is, will you let him? Or will you finally fight back? The line went dead. I sat in my car, the sandwich forgotten, my mind racing. Someone knew about the twins. Someone was watching me. And they'd mentioned my family, the Rogers clan I'd left behind 6 years ago when I'd chosen Jared over blood and loyalty. I'd thought I was done with that world, with the violence and the feuds that had defined generations. But you didn't leave the Mafia. It followed you wherever you went, patient and persistent, waiting for the perfect moment to drag you back in. That afternoon, Mr. Reynolds called me into his office. His hand shook as he gestured for me to sit, and there was something in his expression that made my stomach clench. Ms. Rogers, I've been asked to inform you of a change in your duties. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Effective immediately, you'll be working directly for Mr. Winston. His personal assistant position has become available, and he's requested you specifically. The room tilted. I'm just a receptionist. I don't have the qualifications to... It's not a request. Reynolds finally looked at me, and I saw pity in his eyes. Mr. Winston was very clear. You're to report to the executive floor tomorrow morning at 8. Your salary will be adjusted accordingly. I don't want the position, I said, desperation making my voice sharp. Please, Mr. Reynolds. There must be someone else. Someone more qualified. I'm sorry. He actually looked like he meant it. When Jared Winston wants something, he gets it. And apparently, he wants you. I walked out of his office on legs that felt like they might collapse at any moment. This was it. Jared's first move. He was pulling me closer, positioning me where he could watch me, control me, discover all my secrets. The promotion wasn't a reward. It was a cage, beautifully disguised, but a cage nonetheless. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Different from the one that had called earlier, but I knew instinctively who it was from. 8 a.m. tomorrow. Don't be late. And Josie, wear something appropriate. You represent me now. Jay. I stared at the message, my hands trembling. Beneath it, another text arrived. A photo this time. My heart stopped. It was Jake and Ellie getting off the school bus this afternoon. The angle suggested it had been taken from across the street, close enough to see their faces clearly, close enough to reach them if someone wanted to. A third text. They're beautiful. They have my eyes. He knew. God help me. Jared knew about the twins. And if that photo was any indication, he'd already positioned people to watch them, to make sure I understood exactly how thoroughly he controlled this situation. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the terror that turned my blood to ice. He had people watching my children, my babies, the two people in this world I would die to protect. Another text. We need to talk. Tonight. I'll send a car at 7. Be ready. It wasn't a request. It was a command. And I was trapped, completely and utterly trapped, because refusing meant putting my children at risk. Agreeing meant stepping willingly into Jared Winston's web. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning through scenarios and coming up blank every time. There was no escape, no safe option. Jared had made sure of that with surgical precision. Maria met me at the door, the twins playing in the living room behind her. Josie, honey, you look terrible. Are you okay? Fine, I managed. Just a long day. Thank you for watching them. Always. She squeezed my arm. There was someone here earlier. A man in a suit. He said he was from your work, checking addresses for some new insurance policy. I didn't let him in, but he seemed very interested in the twins. Of course he was. Jared was being thorough, making sure I understood that nowhere was safe, no one was beyond his reach. I paid Maria and got the twins ready for bed early, holding them tighter than usual as I read their bedtime stories. They didn't notice anything wrong, lost in the adventure of the book, their small bodies warm and trusting against mine. Mama, why are you crying? Ellie asked, her small hand touching my wet cheek. Happy tears, I lied, kissing her forehead. Because I love you so much. We love you too, Jake said seriously. Forever and ever. Forever and ever. If only I could promise them that. If only I could guarantee that Jared wouldn't tear our small family apart the moment he confirmed what he already suspected. At 6:45, I changed into the nicest dress I owned, a simple navy sheath that I'd bought for job interviews. My hands shook as I applied makeup, trying to cover the dark circles under my eyes. In the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Where was the girl who'd been brave enough to love Jared Winston? Who'd believed that love could conquer family loyalty and blood feuds? She was gone, replaced by a terrified mother who would do anything to protect her children. The car arrived at exactly 7. A black Mercedes with tinted windows, the driver a man I'd seen in the building security team. He opened the door for me without speaking, his face professionally blank. I climbed in, my heart hammering, and found Jared waiting in the back seat. He'd changed from his suit into dark jeans and a black shirt that made him look younger, more like the man I'd known 6 years ago. But there was nothing soft in his expression as his eyes traveled over me, assessing and cold. Josie, he said, my name a statement of ownership. We have a lot to discuss. The car pulled away from the curb, taking me into the night, into the unknown, into the clutches of the only man I'd ever loved, and the most dangerous enemy I could have. And I had no choice but to see where he would take me. The Mercedes glided through the darkening streets of Austin, heading away from the downtown towers toward the outskirts where old money built estates hidden behind stone walls and iron gates. I kept my hands folded in my lap, trying to control their trembling, acutely aware of Jared's presence beside me. He hadn't spoken since we'd left my apartment, just sat there watching the city pass by, his silence more unnerving than any interrogation could have been. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. Where are we going? Somewhere we can talk without interruption. His voice was flat, emotionless. You owe me that much, at least. I don't owe you anything, I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. He turned to look at me then, and the intensity in his dark eyes made my breath catch. Don't you? 6 years, Josie. 6 years you've been hiding my children from me. There it was, the confirmation I'd been dreading. They're not... Don't lie to me. The words were soft but edged with steel. I've seen the photos. Jake and Ellie, 6 years old, born exactly 9 months after you disappeared. They have my eyes, my chin, my mother's nose. Did you really think I wouldn't recognize my own blood? My throat closed up, all my carefully prepared denials dying before they could form. He knew. He'd always known, probably from the moment he saw me yesterday. And I'd been foolish enough to think I could keep the truth from him. "How long have you been watching us?" I whispered. "Since the moment I learned you were working in my building." He leaned back, his posture deceptively relaxed. "I have people everywhere, Josie. Did you think I wouldn't run a background check on a new employee? Especially one with the last name Rogers?" The family connection. Of course, the Rogers and Winstons had been enemies for 3 generations, their territories carved out through blood and violence. My father had forbidden me from even speaking to a Winston, and I'd fallen in love with the heir to their empire anyway. "If you knew," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "why wait until now to confront me?" Because I wanted to be sure. The car turned through a gate that opened automatically, revealing a long driveway lined with oak trees. "I needed to confirm that you were the same Josie Rogers who ran away 6 years ago. The same woman who swore she loved me and then vanished without a word." The bitterness in his voice cut deep. "You told me to leave," I said, old wounds tearing open. "You said there was no future for us, that your family would never accept a Rogers, that I should go before someone got killed." "I never said that." His voice was dangerously quiet. "I would never have told you to leave, not when you were carrying my child." The denial hit me like a slap. "Don't lie to me, Jared. I was there. I heard you with my own ears." "What did you hear exactly?" He leaned forward, his gaze pinning me in place. "Tell me word for word what I supposedly said." I closed my eyes, the memory still fresh despite the years. That last night, hiding in the shadows of his family's estate, listening to him talk to someone I couldn't see. "You said that loving me was a mistake, that I was a liability your family couldn't afford, that I had to go before your brother found out, before the Rogers used me against you. And you believed that?" The pain in his voice made my eyes snap open. "After everything we'd shared, every promise I'd made, you actually believed I would say those things?" "I heard you," I insisted, but doubt was creeping in, cold and insidious. "I heard your voice. You heard what someone wanted you to hear." He pulled out his phone, his fingers moving over the screen. My brother Marcus was very good at manipulating situations, at removing obstacles he deemed threats to the family legacy. He turned the phone toward me. On the screen was a grainy photo, date-stamped 6 years ago. It showed 2 men in what looked like a recording studio. One was Marcus Winston, Jared's older brother, unmistakable even in profile. The other I didn't recognize. "Marcus hired an impersonator," Jared said, his voice hollow. "Someone who could mimic my voice perfectly. He staged that conversation knowing you were nearby, knowing you'd overhear. He wanted you gone, Josie, because he knew that if we stayed together, if our families actually united through us, it would threaten his control over the Winston Empire." The world tilted. "No, that's not..." He confessed before he died. Jared's jaw clenched. In the warehouse, when everything went to hell, he thought he was protecting the family by keeping us apart, by making sure I married within our world, someone acceptable, someone who would strengthen alliances instead of creating dangerous complications. I stared at the photo, my mind reeling. All these years, I'd believed Jared had rejected me, had chosen power over love. I'd raised our children alone, scraping by on minimum wage jobs and government assistance, too proud to go back to my family, and too terrified to reach out to the man I thought had betrayed me. And it had all been a lie. Why didn't you come after me? The question tore from my throat. If you didn't want me to leave, why didn't you find me? I tried. His voice cracked, the first real emotion breaking through his controlled facade. I spent 6 months searching for you, Josie. I hired investigators, threatened your family, called in every favor I had. But you disappeared completely. Changed your name, moved across state lines, covered your tracks like a professional. By the time I picked up your trail, my brother was dead, and I was drowning in responsibilities I'd never wanted. So you gave up, I said bitterly. I got angry. He looked away, his profile sharp against the window. I convinced myself that if you could leave so easily, if you could believe I'd betray you without even confronting me, then maybe we'd never had what I thought we did. I threw myself into work, into building the empire Marcus had died protecting. I became the man everyone expected me to be. The car had stopped, I realized. We were parked in front of a house, not the ostentatious mansion I'd expected, but a smaller estate, beautiful in its simplicity. Lights glowed warm in the windows. Where are we? I asked. My home. The real one, not the showpiece downtown. He opened his door. Come inside, please. We have more to discuss. I should have refused, should have demanded he take me back to my children. But the revelations had left me reeling, and some part of me needed to hear the rest of his story, needed to understand what had really happened 6 years ago. Inside, the house was surprisingly warm. Not the cold museum of wealth I'd expected, but a lived-in space with comfortable furniture and family photos on the walls. I saw a younger Jared with his brother Marcus, both smiling. Their parents, severe but handsome. And mixed in, candid shots of Jared alone, looking lonely despite the luxury surrounding him. Drink? He moved to a bar cart, his movements stiff. Water, I said, not trusting myself with anything stronger. He poured water for me and whiskey for himself, neat. We sat on opposite ends of a leather couch, the distance between us feeling like miles. I need to know, I said quietly. If everything you're saying is true, if Marcus manipulated us both, why show me this now? Why bring me here? Because you're working for me now. Because you're back in my world whether you want to be or not. And because Jake and Ellie deserve to know their father. He took a long drink. I'm not asking you to forgive me for not finding you sooner. I'm not even asking you to trust me, but I am telling you that I'm going to be part of my children's lives. The only question is whether we do this as enemies, or if we find a way forward. A way forward, I repeated. What does that look like? You and the twins move in here. Full security, everything they need. The best schools, the best doctors. You quit the job at Winston Enterprises and focus on being their mother. In exchange, I get to be their father. Regular visits, involvement in decisions, a real relationship with them. It sounded reasonable, almost too reasonable. And what about my freedom? What about when I want to leave? When I decide this isn't working? His expression hardened. You won't leave. Not again. Not with my children. There it was, the ultimatum beneath the reasonable offer. Agree to his terms or face the consequences. So I'm a prisoner, I said flatly. Just a comfortable one. You're protected. He leaned forward. His intensity focused entirely on me. You think you're safe in that apartment? You think the Rogers family hasn't noticed your back? That they won't use you and the twins against me the moment they realize who those children really are? Ice flooded my veins. My family wouldn't... Your family has been trying to destroy mine for 30 years, Josie. And you, with your connection to both sides, with my children, you're the perfect weapon. The only way I can keep you safe is if you're under my protection. Here, in my home, where I control every variable. I won't be controlled, I said, even as I recognized the trap closing around me. Not by you, not by anyone. Then we're at an impasse. He stood, pacing to the window. Because I won't let my children grow up as targets. I won't let them be used as pawns in a war they didn't choose. So here's my final offer, Josie. Move in here. Let me protect you and the twins. In exchange, I'll give you everything you need, everything you've been struggling to provide on your own. Financial security, safety, a real future for Jake and Ellie. And if I refuse? He turned to face me, and the look in his eyes was pure Winston. Cold, calculating, ruthless. Then I'll take them anyway. I have resources you can't imagine. Lawyers who could tie you up in court for years. I can prove you're an unfit mother, living in poverty, unable to provide. I'll make sure you never see them again. The threat hung in the air between us, brutal in its honesty. You wouldn't, I whispered. But I knew he would. This was Jared Winston, the man who'd taken over his family's empire and expanded it through sheer force of will. The man who eliminated obstacles and crushed opposition. Love might have existed between us once, but that was before betrayal and lies and 6 years of separation. Try me, he said softly. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth in his eyes. He would take my children if I refused his protection, not out of cruelty, but out of a bone-deep certainty that his way was the only way to keep them safe. And maybe, God help me, maybe he was right. I need time, I said, my voice breaking. I need to think about this, to figure out what's best for Jake and Ellie. You have 24 hours. He pulled out his phone. The car will take you home. Tomorrow night. Same time. You give me your answer. Choose wisely, Josie, because this offer won't come again. Let me continue writing in first person, maintaining the emotional intensity and the dark romance atmosphere. The ride back to my apartment was silent, the driver's eyes never meeting mine in the rearview mirror. I sat in the back seat, my mind spinning with everything Jared had revealed. Marcus had manipulated us both. The conversation I'd overheard had been staged. 6 years of believing Jared had rejected me. 6 years of struggling alone. All based on a lie. But knowing the truth didn't make my current situation any less terrifying. Jared wanted control. Wanted me and the twins under his roof, under his protection. And he'd made it clear that refusal wasn't really an option. When we pulled up to my building, I noticed immediately that something was wrong. The usual dim glow from the exterior lights was gone, leaving the entrance in shadow. And there, leaning against the wall near my apartment door, was a man I recognized with a jolt of pure dread. Daniel Rogers, my cousin, built like a linebacker with cold blue eyes and a smile that had never reached them. Josie, he said as I approached, my keys clutched in my shaking hand. Long time no see, cuz. I stopped several feet away, every instinct screaming danger. What are you doing here, Danny? Can't a man visit family? He pushed off the wall, and I noticed the bulge under his jacket that suggested he was armed. Especially when that family's been gone for 6 years without a word. Your daddy's been worried sick. My father knows exactly why I left, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. And he knows better than to send you to my home. See, that's where you're wrong. Danny's smile widened. Daddy's real interested in where you've been, who you've been with, especially now that word's gotten around you're working for the Winstons. My blood ran cold. I'm just a receptionist. It's just a job. Is it? He took a step closer and I fought the urge to run. Because funny thing, Josie, we hear Jared Winston himself has taken a personal interest in you. Promoted you to his personal assistant. Now, why would he do that for a simple receptionist? I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? His eyes flicked to my apartment door. You know what else is funny? Those twins you've been raising. 6 years old, right? About the same age as the time you disappeared after that summer you spent sneaking around with Winston's son. Terror turned my legs to water. They knew. My family knew about Jake and Ellie, knew about their connection to Jared. "Leave them alone," I whispered. "They're children. They have nothing to do with this." "Nothing to do with it?" Danny laughed, the sound harsh and ugly. "Josie, honey, those kids are everything to do with it. You know how long we've been waiting for leverage against the Winstons? And here you are, gift-wrapped, with their heirs bastards. Don't call them that." The words came out fierce despite my fear. "Don't you dare." "You need to come home," he interrupted. "Daddy wants to see you, wants to meet his grandkids, and he wants to discuss how we're going to use them to finally bring the Winston Empire to its knees." "No," I backed toward my door. "I'm not doing this. I'm not letting you use my children as weapons in your vendetta. It's not really up to you anymore." He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, then turned it toward me. "See that van across the street? My boys are in there. One word from me, and they grab those kids from school tomorrow. You'll never see them again." The image on the screen showed Jake and Ellie's school, the playground where they spent recess, clear as day, impossible to miss. "You're bluffing," I said, but my voice shook. "Try me." His smile was cold. "You've got until tomorrow night to bring those twins to Daddy, otherwise we take them ourselves. And trust me, cuz you don't want to know what happens after that." He walked away, disappearing into the shadows, leaving me trembling outside my own apartment. I fumbled with my keys, finally getting the door open, and rushed inside to where Maria was reading on my couch. "Josie, you're white as a sheet. What happened?" I couldn't answer, could barely breathe past the terror constricting my throat. My family had found me. They knew about the twins, and they were planning to use my babies as weapons against Jared. After Maria left, after I'd checked on the twins 3 times to make sure they were safe and sleeping peacefully, I sat on my couch with my phone in my hand. Jared's number was already programmed in, added without my permission during the car ride. I stared at it for a long time, fighting with myself. Calling him would mean admitting he was right, that I needed his protection, his power, his resources. It would mean surrendering my independence, my freedom, everything I'd fought for these past 6 years. But the alternative was letting my children fall into the Rogers family's hands. My finger hovered over the call button. Before I could second-guess myself, I pressed it. He answered on the first ring. "Josie, they came to my apartment." The words tumbled out. "My cousin Danny, he knows about the twins. He said my father wants to use them against you, that they'll take them from school tomorrow if I don't. Where are you now?" His voice had gone hard, dangerous. "Home. The twins are asleep. But Jared, he showed me photos of their school, said he had people watching. Pack a bag, enough for a few days. Wake the twins if you have to." I could hear him moving, could hear voices in the background giving orders. "I'm sending a team to you now. They'll be there in 10 minutes. Don't open the door for anyone else. Jared." "This is exactly what I warned you about, Josie. Your family isn't going to let this go, not when they've finally found a way to hurt me." His voice softened slightly. "Let me protect you. Let me protect our children. Please." Our children. The first time he'd said it like that, claiming them openly. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, we'll come." "Good girl." Relief colored his tone. "My men will get you out of there safely. I'll meet you at the house." He ended the call, and I sat there for a moment, processing what I'd just agreed to. Then survival instincts kicked in. I moved quickly through the apartment, throwing clothes and essentials into a bag. The twins' favorite toys, their stuffed animals, the things that would make this transition easier. When I went to wake them, Ellie stirred first, her dark eyes confused. "Mama? What's happening?" "We're going on an adventure, baby," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Remember how I told you about surprise sleepovers? We're having one tonight." "Where?" Jake sat up, more alert than his sister, his expression worried. "Somewhere safe," I promised, helping them into their clothes. "Somewhere special. But we need to be very quiet, okay? Like secret agents." That got them excited despite the odd hour. They loved playing secret agents, loved pretending they were on mysterious missions. If only they knew how real this mission was. Exactly 10 minutes later, there was a soft knock at the door. I checked the peephole and saw 3 men in dark suits, one of them Marcus from Winston Enterprises Security. "Mrs. Rogers," Marcus said when I opened the door, his voice low and professional. "We're here to escort you and the children to safety. Are you ready?" I looked back at my apartment, at the life I'd built here. Humble and struggling, but mine. Then I looked at my children, sleepy and trusting, holding their favorite stuffed animals. "We're ready," I said. The extraction was military precise. 2 men flanked us while Marcus carried our bags, and they moved us quickly to a black SUV with tinted windows. The twins thought it was exciting, whispering to each other about the secret mission. I held them close, my heart hammering as we pulled away from the apartment building. I caught sight of the van Danny had mentioned, parked across the street. As our SUV passed, I saw movement inside, saw someone reach for a phone. They'd report back to my father that we were gone, that Jared had moved faster than they'd anticipated. The war my cousin had threatened was already beginning. The drive to Jared's estate took 20 minutes. The twins had fallen back asleep, curled against me on either side, when we pulled through the gates. Jared was waiting on the front steps, and my breath caught at the sight of him. He'd changed into jeans and a dark sweater, his hair slightly mussed as though he'd been running his hands through it. When he saw us, something in his expression shifted, softened. He moved toward the SUV as Marcus opened the door. "Let me," Jared said quietly, and carefully lifted Jake from my lap. My son stirred slightly but didn't wake, his small hand clutching Jared's sweater. Something in my chest cracked at the sight. Father and son, together for the first time. Jared's expression was unreadable as he looked down at Jake's sleeping face, but his hands were gentle as he cradled him. "He looks like you," he said, his voice rough, around the eyes. "He has your stubborn chin," I replied, lifting Ellie into my arms. We carried them inside together, up a wide staircase to the 2nd floor where 2 bedrooms had been prepared. They were beautiful rooms, each decorated in soft colors, with comfortable beds and shelves already stocked with toys and books. "You did all this today?" I asked as we tucked the twins in, pulling soft blankets over their sleeping forms. "I had it done weeks ago." He brushed a strand of hair from Jake's forehead with unexpected tenderness. From the moment I knew about them, I wanted to be ready, just in case. We stood there for a moment, watching our children sleep. Jake had already rolled onto his side, one hand stretched toward his sister in the other bed. Ellie snored softly, her favorite stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. "They're beautiful," Jared said quietly. "Perfect." "They're everything to me," I whispered. "Everything I've fought for these past 6 years." He looked at me then, and in the dim light from the hallway, I could see the emotion he was struggling to contain. "I missed everything. First steps, first words, first days of school. 6 years I'll never get back." The pain in his voice made my throat tight. "I'm sorry." "God, Jared, I'm so sorry. If I'd known the truth, if I'd known Marcus was lying. We both lost time we can't recover." He moved toward the door, gesturing for me to follow. But we have now. We have the chance to build something different. In the hallway, he closed the door softly behind us. We stood there in the quiet, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. "Your room is down the hall," he said. "I'll show you." He led me to another bedroom, this one larger, decorated in shades of cream and sage. My bags were already there, placed neatly on a bench at the foot of the bed. "There's an ensuite bathroom. Anything you need, just ask." He hesitated at the door. "Josie, I know this isn't what you wanted. I know you feel trapped. But I meant what I said. I'll keep you safe. All of you." "At what cost?" I asked. "What do you expect from me in exchange for this protection?" His expression was unreadable. "Nothing you're not willing to give. I'm not my brother, Josie. I won't manipulate you or force you into anything. But I do expect honesty, and I expect you to let me be a father to Jake and Ellie." "And us?" The question escaped before I could stop it. "What are we to each other now?" He moved closer, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. "That's up to you," he said softly. 6 years ago, I would have given you everything. Would have walked away from the family business, started over somewhere new, built a life where we could just be Jared and Josie instead of Winston and Rogers. And now I can't walk away. I have responsibilities, people depending on me, an empire to run. His hand came up to cup my face, his thumb tracing my cheekbone. "But I still want you, Josie. Never stopped wanting you, even when I convinced myself I hated you for leaving." My breath caught at the honesty in his voice, at the heat in his dark eyes. "This is insane," I whispered. "We can't just pick up where we left off." "No," he agreed. "We can't. Too much has happened. Too much has changed. But maybe we can start over. Build something new." He leaned down, his lips hovering just above mine, giving me time to pull away, to refuse. But I didn't. Couldn't. Because despite everything, despite the fear and the anger and the 6 years of separation, I still felt it. That pull, that magnetic connection that had drawn us together in the first place. When his lips met mine, it was like coming home and stepping off a cliff all at once. The kiss started gentle, almost tentative, as though Jared was afraid I might shatter under his touch. But then I made a small sound in the back of my throat, my hands fisting in his sweater, and whatever control he'd been maintaining snapped. His arms came around me, pulling me flush against him, and the kiss deepened into something desperate and consuming. 6 years melted away. I was 22 again, young and reckless, and so completely in love with this man that nothing else mattered. Not the family feud, not the danger, not the consequences, just the way he made me feel. Alive, wanted, cherished. But I wasn't that girl anymore. And this wasn't some stolen moment in the darkness where we could pretend the real world didn't exist. I pulled back, my breathing ragged, my heart hammering against my ribs. "We can't do this." Jared's hands were still on my waist, his forehead resting against mine. "Why not?" "Because everything's different now. We have children to think about. Your world, my family, the danger." "All reasons why we should be together," he interrupted. "United front, remember? Stronger together than apart." "That's not what this is about, and you know it." I stepped out of his arms, needing distance to think clearly. "You're using the twins as leverage to get me back, to finish what we started 6 years ago." His expression hardened. "Is that what you think? That I'd manipulate my own children to get you into my bed?" "I don't know what to think anymore," I admitted, wrapping my arms around myself. 24 hours ago, I believed you'd abandoned me. Now you're telling me it was all lies, that you searched for me, that you never stopped wanting me. It's too much, too fast. Then we'll go slow. His voice gentled. I'm not asking you to fall back into my arms tonight, Josie. I'm just asking you to stay, to let me protect you and the twins while we figure this out. And what happens when we do figure it out? I challenged. What happens when this arrangement doesn't work, when I want to leave? Then we'll deal with it, he said. But I heard the lie beneath his words. Jared Winston didn't let go of what he considered his, and I'd just delivered myself and his children directly into his hands. I'm tired, I said, suddenly exhausted to my bones. Can we continue this conversation tomorrow? He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Get some rest. We'll talk in the morning. He moved toward the door, then paused. Josie, thank you for trusting me enough to come here. I know it wasn't an easy choice. After he left, I stood in the middle of that beautiful bedroom, feeling more trapped than I had in my cramped apartment. At least there, I'd had the illusion of freedom. Here, surrounded by luxury and protection, I was a bird in a gilded cage. I checked on the twins one more time before trying to sleep. They were still peaceful, still innocent of the storm gathering around them. Jake had kicked off his blankets and I tucked them back around him, pressing a kiss to his forehead. Ellie murmured something in her sleep and rolled over, her small face relaxed and trusting. I'll keep you safe, I whispered. Whatever it takes. Sleep came in fitful waves, broken by nightmares of Danny's cold smile and my father's disappointed face. In my dreams, I was running again, the twins in my arms. But no matter how fast I ran, Jared was always there ahead of me, blocking every escape route. I woke to pale morning light and the sound of children's laughter. For a moment, I was disoriented, the unfamiliar room confusing me. Then memory crashed back and I bolted upright, heart racing. The twins. Where were they? I threw on the robe I found hanging in the closet and rushed into the hallway. The laughter was coming from downstairs. I followed it, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floors, and stopped at the top of the staircase. The scene below made my breath catch. Jared sat on the floor of the living room, still in his clothes from last night, his hair mussed and shadows under his eyes suggesting he hadn't slept. And surrounding him were Jake and Ellie, both in their pajamas, showing him their stuffed animals with that complete trust children had. And this is Mr. Hoppy, Ellie was saying, holding up her rabbit. He's very brave, and he protects me from bad dreams. He looks very brave, Jared agreed seriously, taking the rabbit and examining it with the same careful attention he'd give a business contract. I can tell he takes his job seriously. Who are you? Jake asked with typical 6-year-old directness. Are you Mama's friend? I saw Jared's hands tighten on the rabbit, saw him struggle with how to answer. He looked up and caught sight of me on the stairs, his expression questioning. I came down slowly, settling on the bottom step. Kids, this is Mr. Winston. He's someone Mama knew a long time ago. We're staying at his house for a little while. Why? Ellie climbed into my lap, her small body warm and solid. Is our apartment broken? Something like that, I hedged. But Mr. Winston's house is nice, right? You have your own rooms and everything. It's really big, Jake said, his eyes still on Jared with that unnervingly perceptive gaze. Bigger than anything we've ever had. Well, I have a lot of space, Jared said carefully, and I'm glad you're here to help me fill it. A woman appeared in the doorway, older with kind eyes and an apron. Breakfast is ready, Mr. Winston. I set up in the dining room like you asked. Thank you, Maria. He stood, brushing off his jeans. Are you kids hungry? Starving, Ellie announced, bouncing in my lap. Breakfast was surreal. The dining room table could seat 12, but we clustered at one end, the twins chattering about everything and nothing while picking at pancakes and fruit. Jared watched them with an expression I couldn't quite read, answering their questions with surprising patience. "Do you have kids?" Jake asked suddenly. The room went very quiet. I held my breath, waiting to see how Jared would answer. "No," he said finally. "But I'd like to, someday." "Kids are a lot of work," Jake informed him seriously. "Mama says we're handfuls, but she means it in a nice way." "I'm sure you are." Jared's lips twitched. The best things usually are. After breakfast, Maria offered to take the twins to the playroom she'd apparently prepared, complete with more toys than they'd ever seen. They went eagerly, leaving Jared and me alone at the table. "You didn't tell them," I said quietly. "That's not a conversation to have without you," he replied. "When do you want to tell them? What do you want to tell them?" "I don't know." I pushed my untouched food around my plate. "They're 6, Jared. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that their father is a mob boss? That half their family wants to use them as weapons?" "You tell them the truth," he said. "Age-appropriate truth, but truth nonetheless. That I'm their father. That I want to be part of their lives. The rest can wait." "They'll have questions. Why weren't you there before? Where have you been?" "And we'll answer them together." He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "Josie, I know this is overwhelming, but we have to start somewhere. And the longer we wait, the harder it'll be." Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression went dark. "What is it?" "Your father." He turned the phone so I could see the message. "He wants to meet, today. Neutral ground. He says he just wants to talk." "It's a trap," I said immediately. "Danny threatened to take the twins. Now my father wants to meet?" "He's planning something." "Probably." Jared stood, already typing a response. "Which is why I'm going to agree. But on my terms, my location, my security. You can't seriously be considering this. Your father is right about one thing. We need to talk. All this sneaking around, these threats and counter-threats, it's going to escalate until someone gets killed." His jaw set. "I'd rather face him head-on, establish boundaries, make it clear that you and the twins are off limits." "He won't listen," I said desperately. "The Rogers don't back down, especially not from Winston's. This feud has been going on for 3 generations, Jared. You think one conversation is going to end it?" "No, but it might buy us time to figure out a permanent solution." He pulled out his phone again. "I need to make some calls. Will you be okay here with the twins?" "Where else would I go?" The bitterness in my voice made him frown. "Josie, I'm fine," I interrupted. "Go. Do what you need to do. Just don't get yourself killed trying to protect us." Something flashed in his eyes. "Is that concern I hear? Worried about me, Mrs. Rogers?" "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't make this into something it's not." "Isn't it?" He moved closer, his hand coming up to tilt my chin. "You came to me last night. Called me when you were scared. Kissed me back when I couldn't help myself. Tell me that means nothing." "It means I'm confused," I whispered. "It means 6 years of hating you doesn't just disappear because I found out the truth. It means I don't know how to reconcile the man who broke my heart with the man standing in front of me now." "Then let me show you," he said softly. "Let me prove that I'm not the enemy. That we can build something real this time. Something that lasts. And if we can't, if the past is too broken to fix, then at least we'll know we tried." His thumb brushed across my lower lip. "For them, if not for us. Jake and Ellie deserve parents who can work together, who can put their needs first." He was right, damn him. As much as I wanted to hold on to my anger, my resentment, my fear, our children had to come first. Okay, I said finally. We try. But Jared, if you ever threaten to take them from me again, if you ever use them as leverage, we're done. I'll disappear so completely you'll never find us. Do you understand? His expression was grave. I understand. And I'm sorry for what I said last night. I was desperate, and I said things I shouldn't have. It won't happen again. The apology caught me off guard. The Jared I'd known 6 years ago had been proud, sometimes arrogant. This version, humbled by fatherhood and loss, was harder to resist. Go make your calls, I said, needing distance before I did something stupid like kiss him again. I'll stay with the twins. He left, and I sat alone in that expensive dining room, wondering what the hell I was doing. 24 hours ago, I'd been a struggling single mother with a minimum wage job. Now I was living in a mansion with the father of my children, the man I'd loved and hated in equal measure, preparing for a confrontation with my own family. Through the windows I could see the sprawling grounds, the high walls, the security cameras positioned at regular intervals. Protection, Jared called it. But it looked an awful lot like a prison to me, and I had a sinking feeling I'd just locked myself inside. I should maintain first-person perspective from Josie's POV, keep the emotional intensity high, and progress toward the confrontation with her father while developing the relationship between Jared and Josie. I found the twins in the playroom, surrounded by more toys than I'd seen outside a department store. Ellie was building an elaborate castle with wooden blocks, while Jake examined a remote control car with the focused intensity he brought to everything. "Mama, look," Ellie called when she saw me. "Mr. Winston has princess castles." "I see that, baby." I settled onto the floor beside them, my heart aching at their innocent joy. They had no idea that this beautiful house was as much a fortress as a home. No idea that the man who'd sat with them at breakfast was their father. No idea how complicated their lives had just become. "He's nice," Jake said, not looking up from the car. "Mr. Winston, I mean. He didn't talk to us like we're babies." "Is that so?" "Yeah, and he said we could stay as long as we want, that there's a pool out back and a treehouse and everything." Jake finally looked up, his dark eyes, Jared's eyes, meeting mine. "Are we really staying here, Mama? Or is this just for a little while, like the other places?" The question cut deep. We'd moved so many times over the years, always one step ahead of bill collectors, or nosy landlords, or my paranoia that someone from my past would find us. The twins had learned not to get too attached to any place, to pack their favorite things in backpacks that were always ready. "I don't know yet, sweetheart," I said honestly. "But for now, we're safe here. That's what matters." "Safe from what?" Ellie asked with that child's ability to zero in on the one thing you didn't want to explain. "Just safe," I hedged. "Come on, let's build that castle together." We spent the morning in the playroom, and I tried not to think about Jared downstairs making plans to meet with my father. Tried not to imagine all the ways that meeting could go wrong. My father, Thomas Rogers, was a hard man who'd built his empire through ruthlessness and violence. He'd seen me as a useful piece on his chessboard, someone to marry off to strengthen alliances, and when I'd fallen for a Winston instead, his disappointment had been crushing. I remembered the last time I'd seen him, the night before I'd overheard what I thought was Jared rejecting me. My father had cornered me in the garden of the Rogers estate, his face hard in the moonlight. "You're playing a dangerous game, girl," he'd said, his voice cold. "Sneaking around with Jared Winston. Did you think no one would notice? That there wouldn't be consequences?" "I love him," I'd said, young and defiant and so sure that love was enough. "Love." He'd spat the word like a curse. "Love gets you killed in our world. Gets everyone you care about killed. Is that what you want?" To start a war between our families? We don't have to be enemies, I'd argued. Jared and I could unite the families, end this stupid feud. There is no Jared and I, my father had interrupted. There's Winston and Rogers, blood and territory, power and control, and you're a Rogers, whether you like it or not. That boy is using you, Josie, using you to get information, to find weaknesses he can exploit. When he's done, he'll throw you away like trash. I hadn't believed him then, but when I'd heard Jared's voice the next night, saying all the things my father had predicted, I'd run. Pregnant and terrified, and certain that both families would destroy me and my unborn children if they knew. "Mama, you're squishing the castle," Ellie said, pulling me back to the present. I looked down and realized I'd been gripping one of the blocks so hard my knuckles had gone white. "Sorry, baby. I was just thinking." About what? About how I'd been a fool 6 years ago. About how I might be an even bigger fool now, trusting Jared when I had so much more to lose. "Nothing important," I lied. "Keep building. That's beautiful." Around noon, Maria brought sandwiches to the playroom along with juice boxes for the twins. She smiled at their enthusiastic thanks, her eyes kind when they met mine. "Mr. Winston asked me to tell you he'll be back by dinner," she said quietly. "He wanted you to know that security has been doubled. No one gets in or out without his approval." "Thank you, Maria." After she left, I sat watching the twins eat, my own sandwich untouched. Doubled security. Because Jared was meeting with my father and expected retaliation. Because the war I'd been running from for 6 years was finally catching up to us. The afternoon dragged. I tried to engage with the twins, to be present for their games and questions. But part of me was always listening for the sound of Jared's return, wondering if he'd come back at all, or if this meeting would end the way so many conflicts between our families had ended. In blood. When the sun started to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I finally heard the front door open. Male voices, low and urgent. Then footsteps on the stairs. "Stay here," I told the twins. "Keep playing. I'll be right back." I found Jared in the hallway outside the playroom, his face drawn and tired. There was a cut on his cheekbone that hadn't been there this morning, and his knuckles were scraped raw. "What happened?" I demanded, reaching for his hand before I could stop myself. "Your father happened." He didn't pull away, just stood there letting me examine his injuries. He brought Danny and 3 others, made it very clear that he sees you and the twins as his property, not mine. Ice flooded my veins. "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That you and the children are under my protection. That any attempt to take them will be met with force." His jaw clenched. He didn't take it well. Obviously, I touched the cut on his face carefully. "This needs to be cleaned." "It's nothing. It's something." I took his uninjured hand and pulled him down the hallway to what I guessed was his bedroom. "Sit. Let me take care of it." His bathroom was all marble and glass, expensive and impersonal. I found a first aid kit under the sink and wet a cloth with warm water. Jared sat on the edge of the tub, watching me with those dark eyes as I cleaned the cut. "Does it hurt?" I asked. "I've had worse." That's not an answer. "Yes," he admitted, "but not as much as seeing your father's face when I told him about the twins. He already knew, Josie. Danny told him everything. And now he's planning to use that information to destroy me." My hands stilled on his face. "How?" "He's going to the other families, telling them I have illegitimate children with a Rogers, that I've been hiding them for years. In our world, that's weakness. Proof that I can be manipulated, controlled." He caught my wrist gently. "He's going to use you and Jake and Ellie to turn my allies against me." "Then let us go," I said desperately. "We'll disappear again. If we're not here, he can't use us. He'll find you." Jared's voice was flat, certain. Now that he knows about the twins, he'll never stop looking. And next time, I won't be there to protect you. So what do we do? He stood, his hands framing my face with that familiar tenderness that made my heart ache. We give them what they don't expect. We get married. I went very still. What? Your father thinks you're my weakness. We prove him wrong. We turn you into my strength. His thumbs stroked my cheekbones. If you're my wife, you're family. The children are legitimate heirs. No one can use you against me without declaring war on the entire Winston organization. That's insane, I breathed. We can't just get married because it's strategically convenient. Why not? Arranged marriages happen all the time in our world. This one just comes with the benefit of us actually caring about each other. We don't even know each other anymore, Jared. 6 years is a long time. Then we'll learn. He leaned his forehead against mine. I know this isn't romantic. I know it's not the proposal you dreamed of. But it's the best way to protect you and the twins. As my wife, you're untouchable. As my children, Jake and Ellie inherit everything I've built. Your father can't hurt any of you without coming through me first. And what about love? The question escaped before I could stop it. What about building something real instead of strategic? Who says it can't be both? His voice dropped to a whisper. I loved you 6 years ago, Josie. Loved you enough to search for you even when I thought you'd betrayed me. That doesn't just disappear because time passed. You don't know me anymore, I repeated. I'm not the girl you remember. I'm harder now, more careful. I have walls you can't just break down with pretty words. Good. He pulled back enough to meet my eyes. I don't want the naive girl who ran away. I want the woman who survived 6 years alone, who raised 2 children on nothing, who called me for help, even though it terrified her. I want the woman standing in front of me right now. God help me. I wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that we could somehow make this work, that marriage could be both protection and partnership, strategy and love. I need to think, I said, stepping out of his arms. This is too important to decide because I'm scared or desperate. Take all the time you need. He moved to the door, then paused. But Josie, your father gave me 72 hours to turn you and the twins over to him. After that, he comes for you with everything he has. So however long you need to think, make it less than 3 days. After he left, I sank onto the edge of the tub, my head in my hands. 72 hours to decide the rest of my life. To choose between freedom and protection, between independence and security for my children. I thought about Jake and Ellie downstairs, playing in their beautiful new rooms. About the life Jared could give them. The best schools, the best opportunities, a father who clearly wanted to be part of their lives. And I thought about the cost. Becoming Mrs. Jared Winston meant entering his world completely, meant giving up any hope of a normal life, of raising my children away from violence and danger, meant binding myself to a man I wasn't sure I could trust, no matter how much I wanted to. But staying separate meant running again, meant looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life, waiting for my father to find us, meant watching my children grow up in poverty, always moving, never having a real home. There was no good choice, just different shades of compromise. That evening, we ate dinner together like a real family. The twins chattered about their day, showing Jared the castles they'd built and the pictures they'd drawn. He listened with genuine interest, asked questions, praised their creativity. And when Ellie climbed into his lap without hesitation, her small arms around his neck, I saw his expression crack open with something raw and vulnerable. This was real. His love for them. His desire to be their father. Whatever else was complicated between us, that was pure and honest. After dinner, after the twins were bathed and tucked into bed with stories and kisses, I found Jared in his study. He was on the phone, speaking in rapid Italian, but he ended the call when he saw me. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Can't think," I corrected. "Can't figure out what the right answer is." He set down his phone, giving me his full attention. "There isn't a right answer, Josie. There's just the choice we make and what we do with it after." I moved into the room, running my fingers along the spines of books on his shelf. "Tell me about that summer, about us. I need to remember why I fell for you in the first place." His expression softened with memory. "You were working at that diner on Route 10. I came in after a meeting that had gone badly, looking for coffee and quiet. You brought me pie I didn't order and told me I looked like I needed sugar more than caffeine." I smiled despite myself. "You were so arrogant, sitting there in your expensive suit, clearly slumming in our little diner. And you called me on it, told me that money doesn't buy happiness or good pie." He stood, moving closer. I came back the next day, and the day after that. Made excuses to be in that part of town just to see you. I thought you were stalking me. I was. His hand settled on my waist, pulling me closer. Couldn't help myself. You were real, Josie. In a world full of people pretending, performing, you were just yourself. Beautiful and sharp, and completely unimpressed by the Winston name. I was terrified when I found out who you really were, I admitted. Knew my father would kill me if he found out I'd been seeing you, but you kept seeing me anyway. Yeah. I looked up at him, at this man who'd been both my greatest love and deepest heartbreak. I was young and stupid, and so completely in love with you that nothing else mattered. And now? His voice was barely a whisper. What about now? Now I'm older and smarter and still completely terrified of what you make me feel. He kissed me then, soft and slow, a question and a promise all at once. And I kissed him back, letting 6 years of anger and hurt and desperate longing pour into it. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, I knew I'd made my decision. 72 hours, I said. Ask me again in 72 hours. If we're both still alive, if this is still what you want, then yes. I'll marry you. His smile was brilliant, transforming his face. I'll still want it. Still want you. I promise. Don't make promises you can't keep, Jared Winston. Then I'll just have to keep this one. He pulled me close again, his arms strong and warm around me. Whatever it takes. I let myself sink into his embrace, just for a moment. Let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, we could make this work. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I heard my father's voice. Love gets you killed in our world. And I wondered if this time, he might finally be right. The next morning, I woke to find Jared's side of the bed empty and cold. We'd fallen asleep on the couch in his study, talking until the early hours about everything and nothing, about the twins' quirks and habits, about the years we'd lost, about the future we might build. Somewhere around 3 a.m, he'd carried me to his bed, and I'd been too exhausted to protest. Now, in the pale morning light, I could see the room properly for the first time. It was surprisingly sparse for a man of his wealth. A king-sized bed with simple gray linens, a dresser, a single chair by the window. No photographs, no personal touches, just the bare necessities for sleep. I found my way to the twins' rooms and discovered them already awake, dressed in new clothes I didn't recognize, chattering excitedly with Maria about pancakes and cartoons. They barely noticed when I kissed their foreheads, too caught up in the novelty of their new lives. Jared was in the dining room, phone pressed to his ear, his expression dark. He looked up when I entered, his eyes softening fractionally before returning to steel. "I don't care what it costs," he said into the phone. "I want every judge, every cop, every official on the Rogers payroll identified by tonight. If Thomas Rogers wants war, I'll show him what that looks like." He ended the call and set the phone down carefully. Morning. Planning World War III over breakfast? I poured myself coffee from the carafe on the sideboard, my hand steadier than I expected. Just securing our position. He watched me over the rim of his own cup. "Your father made his move last night. Spread word through the families that I'm compromised, that my judgment is clouded by a Rogers woman and illegitimate children." I flinched at the word illegitimate. "What are you going to do?" "Exactly what I told you. Make you legitimate. Make our children legitimate. Take away every weapon he's trying to use against me." He paused. "But first, we need to tell Jake and Ellie the truth. They deserve to know before this gets uglier." My stomach twisted. "They're 6 years old, Jared. How do we even begin to explain?" "Together." He stood, crossing to me. "This morning, before I have to leave for another meeting, we sit them down and we tell them, age-appropriate and honest, that I'm their father and I want to be part of their lives. And what if they don't want you?" The question came out sharper than I intended. "What if they're happy with the life we had, just the three of us?" Something flickered in his eyes. Hurt, quickly masked. "Then we deal with that too. But Josie, they have a right to know. And every day we wait makes it harder." He was right, damn him. I'd been putting this off, hiding behind excuses and fear. But the truth was going to come out one way or another. Better they hear it from us than from some vindictive comment from my family, or a news report about the Winston heir's secret children. "Okay," I said quietly. After breakfast. The twins bounced into the dining room moments later, Maria trailing behind with plates of pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. I watched them eat, memorizing their innocent joy, knowing it might be the last morning before everything changed. "Hey guys," Jared said when they'd finished, his voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. "Your mom and I need to talk to you about something important. Can you sit with us for a minute?" They exchanged glances, that twin telepathy thing they did, then nodded seriously. Jake climbed into my lap while Ellie settled next to Jared, her small hand reaching for his without hesitation. That trust, so freely given, made my throat tight. "You know how some kids have a mom and a dad who live together?" I started, my voice shaking slightly. "And some kids have parents who live in different places?" "Like Tommy at school," Ellie said. "His daddy lives in another city." "Right. Well, you guys have a daddy too. He just hasn't been in your lives before because Mama made a mistake." I took a breath, forcing myself to continue. "A long time ago, before you were born, your daddy and I knew each other. We loved each other very much. But some bad things happened and I thought he didn't want us anymore. So I left, and I didn't tell him about you." Jake had gone very still in my lap. "Why?" "Because I was scared and young, and I made a choice I thought was protecting you." Tears pricked my eyes. "But I was wrong. Your daddy would have wanted to know about you, would have wanted to be part of your lives from the very beginning." "Where is he now?" Ellie asked, her voice small. Jared cleared his throat, drawing their attention. "I'm right here, Princess. I'm your daddy." The silence that followed felt endless. I watched a dozen emotions cross Jake's face. Confusion, understanding, something that might have been hope. Ellie just stared at Jared, her brown eyes, so like his, wide and wondering. "You're our daddy?" she finally whispered. "Yes," his voice cracked. "And I'm so sorry I wasn't there before. Sorry I missed so much. But if you'll let me, I'd like to be here now. For everything. Is that why we look like you? Jake asked with that analytical precision he brought to everything. I saw pictures on the walls. We have the same eyes. You do. Jared smiled, though his eyes were suspiciously bright. You both do. And apparently you got my stubborn chin, too. Mama says that's her chin, Ellie argued. We can share, I said, my own tears falling now. Families share lots of things. Are we a family? Jake's question was directed at Jared. A real one? We are, if you want to be. Jared's hands were clenched tight, as though he was physically restraining himself from reaching for them. I know this is a lot to understand, and I know I have to earn the right to be your dad. But I promise you, I'm going to try every single day to be someone you can be proud of. Ellie slid off the chair and walked to Jared with that fearless trust only children possessed. Can I call you Daddy? He lifted her into his lap, his arms careful around her small frame. I would love that more than anything in the world. What about me? Jake asked from my lap. Can I call you Dad instead? Daddy sounds like baby talk. Jared's laugh was wet with tears he was trying not to shed. You can call me whatever you want, buddy, as long as you call me. Just like that, the truth was out. The twins accepted it with that adaptability children had, already moving on to questions about whether Jared knew how to play video games and if he had a dog and could they get a puppy now that they had a dad. I watched them together, this little family we'd somehow created despite everything, and felt something in my chest crack open. Terror and hope and love all tangled together until I couldn't tell where one ended and another began. Later, after the twins had gone back to the playroom with Maria, Jared found me in the garden. I was sitting on a stone bench, staring at nothing, trying to process what had just happened. That went better than I expected, he said, settling beside me. They're resilient. Kids always are. I turned to look at him. But you understand what you just promised them? That you're going to be there, be present, be a real father. I understand. His jaw set, and I meant every word. Whatever else happens between us, Josie, I'm their father. That's not negotiable, not temporary, not strategic. That's forever. Forever's a long time in our world, I said. People don't live long when they're caught between the Winstons and Rogers. Then we'll make sure we're the exception. He took my hand, threading our fingers together. 48 hours left on my proposal. Are you having second thoughts? I'm having all the thoughts, I admitted. But no, I'm not backing out. I made a promise to my children that we'd be a family. I intend to keep it, even if it means marrying me. Especially if it means marrying you. I squeezed his hand. Because despite everything, despite the fear and the complications and the very real possibility that this could all blow up in our faces, I stopped, the words catching in my throat. But he understood anyway. I still love you too, he said quietly. Never stopped, even when I thought I hated you. Some things don't change, no matter how much time passes. His phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He glanced at it, and his expression went dark. What? Your father's moved up his timeline. He's called a meeting of all the families for tomorrow night. Public declaration of your status. Demand that I release you and the twins to Roger's custody. He stood, already texting rapidly. This is it, Josie. The point of no return. Once we walk into that meeting as an engaged couple, as a unified family, there's no going back. Then we'd better make it count, I said, standing beside him, because I'm done running, done hiding. If Thomas Rogers wants a war, let's give him one he'll never forget. Jared's smile was fierce and proud. That's my girl. Now come on. We have a wedding to plan and a war to win. Not necessarily in that order. As we walked back to the house, his arm around my waist and my head held high, I felt it. That shift. That moment when you stop being a victim of your circumstances and start taking control. My father thought he could use me and my children as weapons. He was about to learn just how dangerous a mother could be when her family was threatened. And Jared Winston, the man I'd loved and lost and found again, was about to show the entire Texas underworld why you never came between him and what was his. Tomorrow night, at the meeting of families, we'd make our stand. Together. Let me continue with the preparation for the meeting and the confrontation itself. The next 36 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Jared's house transformed into a war room, men in expensive suits coming and going at all hours, their voices low and urgent behind closed doors. I caught fragments of conversations, alliances being called in, favors being collected, strategic positions being secured. This wasn't just about protecting us anymore. This was about power, about who controlled the Texas underworld. I kept the twins occupied, grateful for Maria's help in maintaining some semblance of normalcy for them. They didn't need to see the weapons being checked, the security being tripled, the cold calculation in their father's eyes as he planned for every possible outcome. The morning of the meeting, I woke to find an elegant black dress laid out in my room. Not the kind of thing I would have chosen. This was armor disguised as couture. High-necked, long-sleeved, the fabric expensive enough to announce wealth without being ostentatious. And beside it, a velvet box containing a ring. The engagement ring was stunning. A large diamond surrounded by smaller stones, set in platinum with delicate engraving along the band. But it was the craftsmanship that caught my breath. The engraving showed two vines intertwined, impossible to separate, growing stronger together. "It was my grandmother's," Jared said from the doorway, making me jump. "She wore it for 53 years. My grandfather had it made when they eloped, when both their families said the marriage would never last." "Did it?" I asked, unable to look away from the ring. "Until the day he died. She followed 6 months later. Said there was no point living without him." He moved closer. "They built something real, Josie. Despite the odds, despite their families, despite everything that should have torn them apart. I'd like to think we can do the same." I finally met his eyes. "You're asking a lot. Asking me to walk into a room full of people who want us dead, wearing your ring, claiming to be your fiancé." "I'm asking you to stand beside me," he corrected. "To show them that you choose this, choose us, choose our family over the feud that's defined our lives." What if I'm not strong enough? The admission came out barely above a whisper. What if I freeze when I see my father when he tries to intimidate me? Jared took the ring from the box and reached for my left hand. "Then I'll be strong for both of us. That's what partners do." He slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly, heavy and solid and impossible to ignore. "You're not alone anymore, Josie. You haven't been since the moment you called me that night." I stared at the ring, at this symbol of commitment and protection, and something that might become love again if we survived long enough. "When do we leave?" 2 hours. "The twins will stay here with Maria and half my security team. The meeting is neutral ground, a hotel conference room downtown. Every major family will be there." His expression hardened. "Your father's going to push, going to try to provoke me into violence. If I respond, if I break the neutral ground rules, I lose everything. And if you don't respond, if you let him say whatever he wants, then I look weak. Either way, it's a trap." He cupped my face, his thumb tracing my cheekbone. "But we have one advantage he doesn't expect. You. He thinks you're still his frightened little girl, still under his control. He's about to learn how wrong he is." The hotel conference room was exactly as Jared had described. Neutral ground, sacred in our world. No weapons, no violence, just words and power plays and the delicate dance of criminal politics. But the tension when we walked in was thick enough to choke on. The room was arranged like a courtroom, with a long table at the front for the heads of each family and chairs arranged in rows for their associates. Every major player in the Texas underworld was there. I recognized some faces from my childhood, men who'd come to my father's house for meetings, who'd patted my head and called me princess while discussing murder and extortion. My father sat at the center of the head table, flanked by Danny and two of his top lieutenants. He looked older than I remembered, his hair more gray than brown, lines of cruelty etched deep around his mouth. But his eyes were the same, cold blue and calculating, assessing everything as potential assets or threats. Those eyes locked on me as Jared and I entered, his arm possessively around my waist, the ring on my finger catching the light. I saw him notice it, saw the muscle in his jaw tick with barely suppressed rage. "Josie," he said, his voice carrying across the sudden silence. "Good of you to join us. I was beginning to think Winston had you locked in a basement somewhere." "She's here of her own free will," Jared replied, his voice level, "as my fiancée, as the future Mrs. Winston." A murmur ran through the room. This was what they'd come for. The confirmation of rumors that had been spreading through the underworld like wildfire. Fiancé. My father's laugh was harsh. That's what he's calling it now? When a man kidnaps his enemy's daughter and forces her into marriage, we used to call that something else. "I wasn't kidnapped," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. Every eye in the room turned to me. "I came to Jared for protection, from you, from Danny, from the family that sees my children as nothing more than weapons to be used." "Your children." My father stood, his hands flat on the table. "You mean the bastards you've been hiding for 6 years? The Winston spawn you thought you could keep secret?" "My children," I corrected, my hand instinctively moving to my stomach in an old protective gesture. "Jake and Ellie, your grandchildren, if you cared about them as people instead of strategic assets." "Don't talk to me about family, girl. You're the one who abandoned yours, who ran off with a Winston and brought shame on the Rogers name." "I ran because I was pregnant and terrified," I shot back, years of suppressed anger bubbling to the surface. "Because I overheard what I thought was Jared rejecting me. Because I knew if you found out about the pregnancy, you'd either force me to get rid of it or use my babies as bargaining chips." "Tell me I'm wrong, Daddy. Tell me you wouldn't have done exactly that." His silence was answer enough. "The point is," Jared interjected smoothly, "Josie and the children are under my protection now. They bear my name, my legacy. Any move against them is a move against the entire Winston organization. I trust everyone here understands what that means." "It means you're weak," another voice called from the assembled families. Marco Castellano, head of the Italian syndicate that controlled the ports. "It means you let emotions cloud your judgment. First, your brother dies, and you take over unprepared. Now you're making alliances through marriage like some medieval king. The Winston Empire is crumbling, and we're all watching it happen." "Is it?" Jared's voice went cold. "Funny. My revenue is up 40% since I took over. My territory has expanded into areas Marcus never touched. And my allies," he glanced around the room, "seem more loyal than ever. If that's crumbling, I'd hate to see what success looks like." "Success," my father spat, "would be recognizing that you've been compromised. That woman and those children are Roger's blood. They belong with their family, not with the man who's using them to legitimize his shaky claim to power." "They belong with their father," I said, stepping forward despite Jared's restraining hand on my arm. "With the man who's given them more love and security in 3 days than you gave me in 22 years. You want to talk about family? About loyalty? You lied to me, Daddy. You and Danny staged that conversation I overheard, made me think Jared had rejected me. You drove me away on purpose because a union between Winston and Rogers threatened your control." The room exploded into noise. Accusations flying, old grievances surfacing, the careful veneer of civility cracking. But I wasn't done. "I'm here tonight to make something very clear," I continued, my voice rising above the chaos. "I am not my father's daughter anymore. I am not a Rogers. I am Josie, mother of Jake and Ellie Winston, fiancée of Jared Winston. And anyone who comes after my family," I looked directly at my father, "will have to come through me first." The silence that followed was absolute. In our world, such a declaration was binding. I'd just publicly severed ties with the Rogers family, claimed the Winston name, drawn a line that couldn't be uncrossed. My father's face had gone purple with rage. "You ungrateful little—" "Careful," Jared interrupted, his voice deadly quiet. "You're talking about my fiancée, the mother of my children. Choose your next words very carefully, Thomas." For a moment, I thought my father might actually attack despite the neutral ground rules. His hand moved toward his jacket, and half the Winston men in the room tensed, ready to respond. But Danny grabbed his arm, whispered something urgent in his ear. My father's hand dropped, but the look he gave me was pure hatred. "You've made your choice," he said, each word precise and cutting. "Don't come crying to me when Winston shows his true colors, when he uses you up and throws you away like he does everything else." "I won't," I said simply. "Because unlike you, Jared sees me as more than a pawn. He sees our children as more than weapons. That's the difference between you and him, Daddy. That's why I'll never come back." The meeting dissolved after that, the various families leaving in clusters, already discussing what my declaration meant for the balance of power. Jared kept me close as we navigated through the crowd, his body a shield between me and anyone who got too close. We were almost to the exit when Danny stepped into our path. "That was quite the performance, cuz," he said, his cold smile not reaching his eyes. "But you're forgetting something important. Those kids might have Winston blood, but they've got Rogers blood too. And blood calls to blood. They'll never truly be his." "They're mine," I said flatly. "That's all that matters. For now." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "But kids grow up, Josie. They start asking questions, start wondering about the family you turned your back on. What happens when they realize their mama chose a criminal over their own grandfather?" "What happens," Jared said, his voice like ice, "is that they grow up safe and loved and far away from the poison you call family. Now move, before I forget we're on neutral ground." Danny's smile widened. "See you around, Winston. You too, cousin. This isn't over." He walked away, and I released the breath I'd been holding. "He's right," I said, as we finally made it outside to where Jared's car waited. "This isn't over. My father's not going to just accept this." "No," Jared agreed, helping me into the back seat. "But we knew that going in. The question is, what's his next move?" We found out 2 hours later. I was checking on the twins, watching them sleep peacefully in their beds, when Jared burst into the room. "We need to go, now." The urgency in his voice sent ice through my veins. "What happened?" "Your father just issued a bounty. $1 million to whoever brings you and the twins to him, alive." His face was grim. Every mercenary, every lowlife, every desperate criminal in Texas just became our enemy. I looked down at my sleeping children, my heart breaking at what I was about to do to them. Again. "Then we run," I said. "We take them and we disappear somewhere he can't find us." "No," Jared's voice was firm. "No more running, Josie. This ends now. I'm calling in every favor, every alliance, every resource I have. We're going to end this threat permanently." "How?" His expression was cold, ruthless, every inch the mob boss he'd become. We go to war. War. The word hung in the air between us, heavy with implications I didn't want to fully comprehend. I'd seen what happened when families went to war in our world. Bodies in the street, businesses burned, innocent people caught in the crossfire. The twins, I whispered, looking at Jake and Ellie's sleeping forms. We can't have a war with them here. What if something goes wrong? What if... Nothing will go wrong. Jared's hand settled on my shoulders, firm and grounding. I have a safe house, completely off the grid. Former military compound, defended like Fort Knox. Maria will take them there tonight with my best security team. They'll be unreachable while we handle this. You want me to send my babies away? Panic clawed at my throat. What if I never see them again? What if your war fails and my father... Look at me. He turned me to face him fully. This war won't fail because I won't let it. Your father made a fatal mistake tonight. He issued that bounty publicly, in front of witnesses. He broke the neutral ground treaty by putting a price on your head before we even left the building. Every family saw it, and half of them are already calling to pledge support to us. Why would they support you over him? Because I represent stability. Your father represents chaos, old grudges, the kind of blood feuds that are bad for everyone's business. His jaw clenched. And because threatening a man's fiancé and children crosses a line that even criminals respect. He's isolated himself, Josie. Now we just have to finish what he started. I wanted to argue, to find another way, but deep down I knew he was right. My father had backed himself into a corner with his rage and his pride. There was no negotiating with a man who'd publicly declared war. How long? I asked. How long until they're safe to come home? 48 hours, maybe less. He pulled out his phone. I'm making the calls now. By morning, Thomas Rogers will understand exactly what he's unleashed. The next few hours were a controlled chaos. Maria packed bags for the twins while I held them, memorizing the weight of their small bodies against mine. They woke briefly, confused but trusting as I explained they were going on a special adventure. Like secret agents? Jake asked sleepily. Exactly like secret agents, I managed, my voice breaking. Maria's going to take you somewhere super safe and fun, and Daddy and I will come get you as soon as we can. Promise? Ellie's small hand found mine in the darkness. I promise, baby. Cross my heart. I kissed them both, breathing in their scent, fighting the terror that this might be the last time. Jared stood in the doorway, watching. When I finally let them go, when Maria led them to the armored SUV waiting outside, he was there to catch me as my knees buckled. They'll be safe, he murmured into my hair. I swear on my life, Josie, nothing will touch them. I clung to him, this man who'd become my anchor in the storm. What happens now? Now we make your father regret he ever issued that bounty. The war room Jared set up in his study looked like something from a military operation. Maps of the city spread across every surface, marked with red and blue pins showing territories and assets. Phone calls came in constantly. Men in suits appearing to give reports, receive orders, disappear back into the night. I sat in the corner, watching Jared orchestrate it all with a precision that was almost beautiful. This was who he really was. Not the gentle father who'd built block castles with our daughter, but the ruthless strategist who doubled his family's empire in 6 years. The Port Authority just pulled Rogers' shipping licenses. One of his lieutenants reported around midnight. Without those, he can't move product. He's losing millions per day. Good. Jared didn't look up from the map he was studying. What about his political connections? Judge Morrison and Commissioner Hayes both called. They're withdrawing support. Said they can't be associated with someone who threatens women and children publicly. I watched my father's power structure crumble in real time, dismantled by Jared's methodical assault on every pillar he'd built his empire on. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like watching a wounded animal being backed into a corner. And cornered animals were the most dangerous. "He's going to retaliate," I said into the quiet after the latest lieutenant had left. "You're taking everything from him. He won't just accept defeat." "I know." Jared finally looked at me, his eyes tired but determined. "That's why we're ending this tomorrow. I've called a final meeting, just him and me. Neutral ground again, but this time with terms he can't refuse." "What terms?" "Complete surrender. He dissolves his organization, retires, leaves Texas permanently. In exchange, I let him live and don't pursue criminal charges that would put him away for life." He crossed to where I sat, crouching so we were eye level. "It's more mercy than he deserves after what he's done. But I'm offering it anyway because he's still your father. Because despite everything, that bond matters." Tears burned my eyes. "You'd do that? Let him go after he threatened our children?" "I'd do anything to give you peace." His hand cupped my face. "Including making deals with men I'd rather destroy. Your father lives, but he loses everything else. That's the compromise." "And if he refuses?" Jared's expression went cold. "Then I don't make the offer again." The meeting was set for noon the next day at the same hotel, same conference room. But this time, the atmosphere was different. No assembled families, no audience. Just my father with Danny at his side, and Jared with me. My father looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. His face was gray, his hands shaking slightly as he sat across from us. But his eyes still held that stubborn rage, that refusal to accept defeat. "You've destroyed me," he said without preamble. "Taken everything I spent 40 years building. I hope you're proud of yourself, Winston." "I gave you a choice," Jared replied calmly. "You could have accepted Josie's decision, acknowledged the children, walked away with your dignity intact. Instead, you declared war. This is the consequence." "She's my daughter." The words came out broken. "My blood, and you stole her." "He didn't steal me, Daddy." I leaned forward, needing him to hear this. "I chose him. I chose our children. I chose a future that didn't involve using people as weapons or treating family as assets." "You chose wrong." He looked at me with something that might have been grief beneath the anger. "That boy's no different than I am, Josie. He's built his empire the same way, on blood and violence and fear. You think he's going to protect you? He's going to use you just like I would have. Except you won't see it coming because you're blinded by what you think is love." "Maybe," I admitted. "Maybe Jared is everything you say. But here's the difference. He's never lied to me about who he is. He's never pretended to be something he's not. And when I came to him scared and desperate, he offered protection without conditions. That's more than you ever did." My father's face crumpled, and for a moment, I saw past the crime boss to the man beneath. The father who'd once pushed me on swings and taught me to ride a bike. Before the family business consumed everything. Before power became more important than love. "I'm offering you a way out," Jared said into the heavy silence. "Sign over your territories, dissolve your organization, leave Texas. Do that, and you get to live. You get to walk away instead of ending up like every other boss who couldn't accept when they'd been beaten." "And if I don't?" My father's voice was hollow. "Then tomorrow morning, every federal agency in Texas gets a file containing 40 years of evidence against you. Every murder, every extortion, every crime you've ever committed. You'll die in prison, Thomas. Alone and forgotten." It was checkmate. We all knew it. My father could fight and lose everything, or surrender and keep his life. Danny leaned close, whispered something urgent in my father's ear. I saw the calculation in my cousin's eyes, the cold assessment of their position. Unlike my father, Danny knew when to fold. "What about my men?" my father asked finally. "The people who've been loyal to me all these years?" "They get absorbed into Winston operations. Fair wages, fair treatment, as long as they swear loyalty to me." Jared's voice was firm. "But you don't get to stay in contact with them. You don't get to maintain influence. You disappear completely, or the deal's off." My father looked at me one last time, and I saw him really see me for the first time in years. Not as a pawn or a disappointment, but as a woman who'd survived despite him, not because of him. "You really love him?" he asked. "Yes," I said, and realized it was true. Somewhere between the fear and the protection and the shared parenthood, love had grown again. Different from 6 years ago, harder and more knowing, but real. "I really do." He nodded slowly, then turned back to Jared. "I want it in writing, every term, every guarantee. And I want Josie's promise that my grandchildren will know who I was before all this. Not the crimes, but the man. They'll know their grandfather loved their mother enough to walk away when staying would have destroyed her," I said. "That's what I'll tell them, that at the end, you chose family over pride. It was more grace than he deserved, but it was also the truth I needed my children to believe. That even broken men could make the right choice eventually." The contracts were signed 2 hours later. Thomas Rogers officially ceased to exist as a power in the Texas underworld. My father walked out of that conference room diminished but alive, and I watched him go with a complicated mix of relief and grief. Danny stayed behind, his cold eyes fixed on me. "This isn't over, cousin. You know that, right? You think signing some papers ends a 40-year feud?" "It does if everyone honors the agreement," Jared said, his hand settling protectively on my waist. "Unless you're planning to break your word." "I'm planning to survive," Danny replied. "Same as I've always done. But fair warning, Winston. Watch your back. Not everyone in the Rogers organization is as sentimental as the old man. Some of us remember that blood is thicker than ink." He left before Jared could respond, but the threat hung in the air between us. "He's going to be a problem," I said quietly. "Let him try." Jared pulled me close, his arms strong and certain around me. "We've won, Josie. Your father's gone, his organization dismantled. Danny can plot all he wants from whatever hole he crawls into, but he doesn't have the resources or the backing to touch us." "Is it really over?" I barely dared to hope. "The war is. What happens next is up to us." He tilted my face up to his dark eyes serious. "Marry me. Tomorrow, next week, whenever you're ready. But make it real this time. Not strategy or protection, just us choosing each other." "I already chose you," I said, rising on my toes to kiss him. "The minute I called you that first night. I just needed time to admit it." His kiss was fierce and claiming and full of promise. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his phone was ringing. "The twins are secure," he said after checking the message. "We can bring them home tomorrow." Home. Such a simple word for something that had felt impossible for so long. But standing there in Jared's arms, wearing his ring, knowing our children were safe, it finally felt real. We had a home. We had a family. We had a future. And it had been worth every terrifying moment of the journey to get here. Let me craft a satisfying conclusion that ties up loose ends while maintaining the dark romance tone. The drive to retrieve the twins the next morning felt like the longest of my life. Jared had insisted on minimal security, just one car following at a discreet distance, wanting to give Jake and Ellie as normal a homecoming as possible. We drove through the Texas countryside in comfortable silence, his hand finding mine across the console, the ring on my finger catching the morning sunlight. "Nervous?" he asked as we turned onto the private road leading to the safe house. Terrified, I admitted. What if they're scared? What if being separated traumatized them? Then we deal with it together. His thumb traced circles on my palm. We have their whole lives to make this right, Josie. One scary weekend doesn't erase that. The safe house was exactly as he'd described. A former military compound transformed into a fortress. But when we pulled through the gates, I saw a playground had been erected in the courtyard. Jake and Ellie were there with Maria, their laughter carrying across the grounds. They hadn't been traumatized. They'd been having an adventure. "Mama! Daddy!" Ellie shrieked when she saw us, launching herself from the swing set and running at full speed. Jared caught her mid-leap, spinning her around as she giggled. Jake followed more slowly, but his face was lit with that rare smile he usually reserved for his favorite books. "You came back. Maria said you would, but I wasn't sure." The admission broke my heart. How many times had I left for work and not come home until late? How many times had circumstances forced me to be absent when they needed me? "I'll always come back," I promised, gathering him into my arms. Always. That's what families do. "Are we really a family now?" he asked against my shoulder. "Like normal families with a mom and a dad who live together?" "We're better than normal," Jared said, crouching down to their level with Ellie still in his arms. "We're a family that fought for each other, that chose each other. That's worth more than normal any day." "Does that mean we can get a puppy?" Ellie asked with perfect 6-year-old logic. "Normal families have puppies." I laughed despite the tears streaming down my face. "We'll talk about the puppy." "That's adult for yes," Jake translated wisely, making Jared chuckle. The drive home was chaos in the best way. The twins talked over each other, competing to tell us about their adventure. The secret rooms, the obstacle course Maria had let them try, the fancy food the security team's cook had made. They'd been scared at first, they admitted, but Maria had made it into a game and they'd felt safe. Safe, the word that had defined my entire adult life. And now, finally, we had it. Back at the estate, reality set in. Jared had calls to make, territories to officially absorb, the practical aftermath of dismantling my father's organization. I spent the afternoon with the twins, reestablishing our routine while Maria prepared their favorite dinner. That evening, after they were bathed and in pajamas, Jared joined us for bedtime stories. He read with dramatic flair, giving each character different voices, making Jake and Ellie dissolve into giggles. Watching him with them, seeing the naked love on his face, I felt something settle deep in my chest. This was right. This man, these children, this family we were building from the broken pieces of our past. After they finally fell asleep, Jared and I retreated to his study. He poured us both whiskey, and we sat by the fireplace in comfortable silence. "I've been thinking," he said finally, "about the wedding, about what you want versus what's expected." "What's expected?" "Big ceremony, all the families, public display of unity." He swirled the whiskey in his glass. "Political theater to cement alliances and show strength." "And what do I want?" "I don't know. Tell me." I thought about it, about white dresses and hundreds of guests and photographers capturing every moment for posterity. About standing in front of people who'd watched my father fall and wondering if they were calculating how to use me next. "I want small," I said. "Just us and the twins. Maybe Maria. Something real instead of strategic." His smile was slow and genuine. "I was hoping you'd say that." "Really? You don't need the big wedding for appearances?" "I need you to be happy. I need our children to see us start this marriage with love instead of obligation." He set down his glass and pulled me into his lap. "Everyone already knows we're together. The families have seen us united. Let them wonder why they weren't invited. It'll drive them crazy." I laughed, relaxing into his embrace. When? This weekend. I'll fly in a judge I trust. We'll have a ceremony in the garden. The twins can be our witnesses, simple and perfect. That fast? I've waited 6 years for you, Josie. I'm not waiting any longer than necessary to make it official. His lips found the sensitive spot below my ear. Unless you need more time? No, I breathed as his hands found their way beneath my shirt. This weekend is perfect. What followed was a claiming in the truest sense. Not the desperate coupling of 6 years ago, not the tentative reconnection of these past weeks, but something deeper. A conscious choice to bind ourselves together, to trust fully, to love without reservation. Later, wrapped in his arms in his bed that was now our bed, I felt the last of my walls crumble. I love you, I whispered into the darkness. I know I said it before, but I mean it now in a way I couldn't then. I love who you are, who you've become, who you are with our children. His arms tightened around me. I love you too. Never stopped, never will. You're it for me, Josie. The only one. The wedding 3 days later was everything I'd wanted and nothing I'd expected. The garden was transformed with white flowers and soft lights. A judge who'd known Jared's grandfather performed the ceremony. Maria stood to the side with tears streaming down her face. But it was Jake and Ellie who made it perfect. They stood between us as we exchanged vows, their small hands in ours, witnesses to the promises that would shape their future. I, Jared Dominic Winston, take you, Josephine Marie Rogers, to be my wife. I promise to love you fiercely, protect you completely, and choose you every day for the rest of my life. I promise to be the father our children deserve and the partner you need. From this day forward, we face everything together. His vows were simple but absolute. When it was my turn, I had to pause to collect myself. I, Josephine Marie Rogers, take you, Jared Dominic Winston, to be my husband. I promise to trust you with my heart, my children, my future. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, to choose us over fear, to build a life worth fighting for. From this day forward, you're my family, my home, my always. The judge pronounced us married, and Jared kissed me while the twins cheered. In that moment, with the Texas sun setting behind us and our children's laughter ringing out, I felt something I hadn't felt in 6 years. Hope. The threat of Danny Rogers, my father's exile, the complicated legacy we'd inherited. It all still existed, but we'd face it together. This family we'd fought so hard to claim. That night, after the twins were asleep and the house was quiet, Jared found me in what had become my favorite spot. The window seat overlooking the gardens where we'd married. No regrets? He asked, sliding in beside me. Only that it took us 6 years to get here. We needed those years, needed to become who we are now instead of who we were then. His arm came around my shoulders. The kids we were couldn't have built this, couldn't have survived what came after. He was right. The naive girl who'd fallen for a mobster's son couldn't have stood up to her father in front of the families. The arrogant boy who'd thought love was enough couldn't have navigated the politics required to protect us. We'd both needed to break before we could build something unbreakable. I got a call today, Jared said after a moment. From my contact in the FBI. They're picking up chatter about Danny. Sounds like he's trying to rebuild, pull together what's left of your father's old network. I tensed. Should we be worried? Always. Men like Danny don't give up easily. His hand found mine, threading our fingers together. But we're ready for whatever comes. We have resources, allies, and something he'll never understand. We're fighting for family, not power. That makes us stronger than he'll ever be. Promise me something, I said, turning to face him. Promise that if it ever comes down to a choice between the business and us, between power and family, you'll choose us. Every time, he said without hesitation. I've already chosen, Josie. The day you called me, the day you came to me scared and desperate, I chose you then, and I'll keep choosing you. The business, the empire, all of it means nothing without you and the twins. I believed him. Against all odds, against everything my past had taught me about men like him, I believed every word. Months later, sitting in that same window seat with Jake on one side working on homework and Ellie on the other drawing pictures of our family, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The fear, the running, the impossible choices that had seemed like the end of everything. My father was living quietly in Arizona, working construction under an assumed name. The last I'd heard, he'd taken up woodworking, finding peace in creating things instead of destroying them. We didn't talk, but I'd sent photos of the twins. Some bridges could be repaired, even if they'd never be the same. Danny had disappeared after a failed attempt to rally support for a move against Jared. Rumor had it he'd gone to Mexico, but no one knew for sure. His absence was both relief and lingering worry. Jared had restructured the Winston Empire, moving away from the most violent aspects, focusing on legitimate business with only enough of the old operations to maintain respect in our world. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. A legacy our children could inherit without shame. Mama, look. Ellie held up her drawing. A family portrait, 4 stick figures holding hands in front of a house. Written at the bottom in her careful letters, My family. We are safe and happy. Safe and happy. Everything I'd wanted, everything I'd fought for, captured in a 6-year-old's crayon drawing. It's beautiful, baby, I said, pulling her close. Jared appeared in the doorway, home from another meeting, his tie loosened and his jacket over one arm. His face lit up when he saw us, that soft expression he reserved only for his family. How are my favorite people? He asked, crossing to drop kisses on each twin's head before finding my lips. Happy, I said against his mouth. We're happy. And we were. Not perfect. Not without challenges or complications. Our world would always carry shadows, always have dangers lurking at the edges. But here, in this moment, in this family we'd built from broken pieces and impossible choices, we'd found something worth more than safety or power or revenge. We'd found home, and that was worth fighting for, today, tomorrow, and every day after, forever.